South Florida.
That is, yeah.
And so I want to just reiterate something that I've been talking about often on this program, which is let's cure some of our problems first before we start begging hordes of people to move to South Florida. So let's get started with our topics for today. And the first one is our wonderful QAnon congressperson from Georgia. We've been seeing what's been going on with the new congressperson. What is her name again? I keep forgetting. Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is the dubbed congressperson from Georgia, the QAnon congresswoman. I want to play, Tommy, if we can, this soundbite from last night's CBS Evening News, and then we'll comment on it.
Tonight, growing outrage at newly elected Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. The noted conspiracy theorist and ardent Trump supporter from Georgia is facing calls to resign and a long-shot bid to expel her from Congress after a review of her social media found in 2018 and 19 she repeatedly indicated support for executing prominent Democrats, including Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Not only is the President of the United States inciting an insurrection, but keeps fanning the flame, endangering the security of members of Congress, to the point that they're even concerned about members in the House of Representatives being a danger to them.
Separately, dozens of Greene's House colleagues are now asking for more security.
We will probably need a supplemental for more security for members when the enemy is within the House of Representatives.
Why are you supporting red flag laws that attack our Second Amendment rights?
And controversy is swirling over this video of Green heckling Parkland school shooting survivor David Hogg. Green has called the shooting that killed 17 a false flag. Fred Guttenberg lost his daughter in the massacre.
And she's a depraved person. She serves no purpose being in Congress. The idea that she got elected is a stain on our nation.
But Green has no plans to resign, telling CBS News Democrats want to take me out because I represent the people, and they absolutely hate it. The uproar comes as Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy tries to end the Republican infighting since the impeachment vote. Today, meeting with former President Donald Trump, who pledged to help Republicans in 2022.
So there you go, guys. I think that nicely frames what's happening. And the question that comes to me now, she's threatening Republican Liz Cheney as well. That's the latest move by this woman. And as much as I despise what she represents and sort of the mistruths that she's putting out there, as I see it, she was duly elected by a congressional district in Georgia, right?
Yeah.
So what do we make of this? I mean, that's what our democracy is all about. People in a given state, a given congressional district have the right to vote in anyone they want into the Senate, the House, their state houses and senates, etc.
I think she's a symptom of a structural situation, right? Like, I looked up her district. It's kind of that northwest corner of Georgia. It's the 10th most Republican district in the country. Is R plus 27 according to Real Clear Politics. So this is one of those districts that's kind of designed to be Republican and always be Republican. And when you have districts like that, the one further to the right usually wins in recent history, right? And Democrats have gerrymandered districts too, but I think what you're seeing it now is she is part of a growing part of the Republican Party, right?
But is that growing part, you guys? Granted, it's a growing part of the Republican Party, but is that part destroying the Republican Party?
Depends on which.
That's the big question, I think.
Well, it depends which side you're on in that fight. I mean, I think a lot of people, the Mitt Romneys of the world, the Paul Ryans of the world, will say this is making our party more intense but smaller, which will take them off the table for any type of national power again, right? And I think but it's just too early to tell which side of that is going to win out. All of this stuff is going to take the next 2 years, if not the next 4 to 6 years, to kind of play out before we know which side's really going to take over the Republican Party or take back the Republican Party.
And it's interesting because to me, Phil, it's almost too early to tell, because I've looked at this through like almost a religious framework, as far as like a false prophet, right? So this is like so many times the end is nigh, right? The earth is going to end. Jesus is coming back on this date. And Q made a prediction that the Great Awakening or the Great Storm was going to happen, and Biden was going to be arrested, and all the Democrats were going to be publicly executed on January 20th. And it didn't happen. So then what happens? And we know what happens from the religions that have prophesized falsely. They kind of splinter into group, but they don't stop. Like people make excuses, right? So it's been interesting following Q since then, the Q followers. I mean, it's very clear. Let's be clear. Q hasn't done they call it a drop. Like Q hasn't issued anything in over 30 days, right? So they don't know where it's going to go. But the followers of Q, which she is one of them, and let's just be clear, like what is Q? Q is a belief that there is a cabal. It's almost like it's almost like ridiculous to say. It's a cabal of cannibalistic child molesters that run the world, and Trump
and infiltrate our government.
Right, run the government through the deep state, and Trump was to save us from the cabal. And now what do they do with it, right? And so I think they have to look at through that framework, right? That's their fundamental belief system. So then you have to look at through the framework of like where this goes next, right? It's like okay, that didn't happen. So now Trump has to be rehabilitated, reelected. And I think that I put it in the lens of, so anyways, I put it through that lens where we can watch that. And it's so upsetting to see her confronting family members and making these false statements. But there is a huge part of this country that believes what she's saying.
That's super interesting that, bringing it through a religious framework, because that's very American. If you look back through history, like how many times has there been a group of people who are like, Jesus is going to come back on this hill and we're all going to gather here and nothing happens, right? That's in the 1800s, that happened every decade or so, right? Yes. There'd be a big movement of a religious fervor that this was going to be the judgment day and we're going to gather at this place. And so, I mean, it seems like looking at it through that lens, I mean, this is a very American phenomenon that we're seeing, and it's not a new phenomenon. It's just the characters have changed.
Yeah, I wonder, and I want to get both of your guys' opinion on it. I wonder a couple things. They made this claim that on January 20th, this was going to occur, and it didn't. Does it lose its credibility, you think, amongst its followers because that didn't occur? Number one. Number two, Kevin McCarthy is the minority leader of the House, going to visit with Donald Trump in the midst of an impeachment trial that's going to occur soon, in the midst of a sort of a splintering, although not a big splintering, but a splintering of the Republican Party. Is he hurting the Republican Party by embracing Donald Trump the way he is, or is he just doing that for his own personal gain?
The former president is still the most popular person within the Republican Party.
True.
It's for those people who say that he's out of office, he's going to be impeached, maybe convicted in the trial, that he's going to just fade away, and all Republicans will say, oh, we actually don't care about this person anymore. That's not going to happen. He's going to be a tremendous force. And I think that's part of the reason why this process in the Republican Party for this inner civil war is going to take years, right? Because nobody's budging on their beliefs at the moment.
It's interesting you say that, because that, I think, Andy, it goes to, I heard someone say the other day that Trumpers love Trump. They don't love all these other nincompoops that are around. Like, no, they don't like Mitch McConnell. They don't like who's the South Carolina guy, Lindsey Graham. They don't like Marco Rubio. They just they tolerate them, but they don't have the Trump factor. They love Trump. And I think that's another lens to look at through. And here we are with NBC6 investigative reporter Phil Prazen, the media needs Trump. Trump's still controlling the media narrative. And I think that there is a thing of, I think Trump's good for business for the media, and I don't think Trump's going anywhere.
The Trump was, let's say on the outrageous scale, Trump was here, right? Now you have this, this new Congresswoman, Taylor Greene, who's up here, right? Is that next Trump, is that next leader going to go beyond sort of Trump's narrative and to
Phil,
the next level?
But I saw a tweet that said that it's like the next person, the person, and this used the word fascist, but like the next fascist is going to be better looking, better spoken, better organized, better tactically. And I think that's what, and basically the point of this tweet was like, let's not wait and then fight that person. Let's like bring the fight now. And so that's how I would answer it, is I think that people are going to learn from Trump that this is a way to power, right? There is a group of, we're going to talk later about the stonks and GameStop, but there is a latent problem in our country that people can tap into.
Well, and I wonder if all of the scrutiny and attention that the Congresswoman is getting now will only embolden her and make her more popular within the Republican Party. Are Republican voters going to look at her and say, this is what they did to Trump? We now have to rally behind her. Very possible.
And it takes it to a whole nother level.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's be honest, I mean, there was a lot of, people in government, congressmen and senators, that in 2016 didn't like what they saw and heard of Donald Trump, and they immediately fell right in line with him because they saw how powerful his pull was with the public. And so it makes you wonder, is people like this going to be, getting a more prominent place in government? You hear what Nancy Pelosi says. I mean, her dialogue clearly is making people uncomfortable that serve in our government right now.
Well, and I think you're onto something there, because any member of Congress, or 99% of them, they're not going to lead the people that they represent. They're going to follow the people and represent the people that they represent. So if their voters believe a certain thing or act a certain way, they're gonna do that.
That brings us to Carlos Jimenez, who is, I think, I don't think it would be offensive to say he's been a moderate his whole political career.
Sure.
And he was one of our representatives that voted to invalidate the legitimacy of Biden's election. And
yeah, but I think that's going to hurt him.
Well, no, but here's what I will tell you. So I was asking around, wow, it was a really interesting move. You're just talking to friends. And someone said his voters are 80% Trump supporters. Like, it's as simple as that. He's got to, I think he's a smart enough guy. I don't think he did that on an ideological basis. I think he did it despite what he believed, honestly.
So you think he sold out?
I think that I mean, that's where I'm going with this. I think that the shadow of Trump, I think that it goes to, I would go back to Phil saying there is a structural problem in America right now that it's like, back in college, I don't know, Phil, if they still teach this, but it was always great man versus kind of political science, systemic stuff. So the idea is did Hitler make Germany into a Nazi state, or was Germany heading toward that, and he just filled the need, right? Did Germany demand Hitler, or did Hitler make Germany? And I think we're running into that now, where there is, I think that Trump, whatever happens to Trump, if Trump dies of a sickness, if he gets ill and dies, I think that need is still there, and there's a group of people in this country that are gonna create a Trump. And I got to tell you something, guys. Part of this is coming from what Phil said before we got on the thing, is America is becoming less white. America is becoming more progressive. And there are people who don't like that. And there are people who truly believe that we're going to become the next Venezuela. And they're going to be violent. Like, if you really believe that, Biden is Chavez, as ridiculous as that is, right? If you really believe that, there is I wouldn't say justifiable, but like, it's not crazy to think, oh, I'm going to blow up the Capitol. Like, I got to stop this.
Well, here we have a comment from someone known as Smelly Pits OMG saying, I hope they are scared. They can be walking to a store and then boom, it happens. What does that mean?
I don't know. We need Smelly Pits on the phone. Look at Bob Powers had a great comment. He talks about religion, and he talks about religion is non-compromising. And in politics, you have to learn to compromise. He says history repeats
so true.
Itself. Don't forget what happened with McCarthy. He used religion. He used outrageous, slanderous tactics. And eventually he just went over the top. And people really started to fight back, and that's where it ended. They don't call it McCarthyism for no reason. And you have that going on with the Republican Party. And that's, I mean, I hope I'm not outing Bob, but Bob's a Republican, right? I mean, he's not a Trump supporter, but he is a Republican at heart. He's a middle of the road guy. And I think that and we get this thing too.
But guys like Bob Powers, let's use Bob as an example. Guys like Bob Powers who are Republican are not happy with what they're seeing happen with the
party. That's where I'm going. But also, I think there's an element. I'd like to hear what Phil's thought on this is. I think that some of the Republicans are like, keep your head down right now.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
If you hate Trump, I think you just got to keep your head down and try to ride this out.
Well, and once again, everybody has their fingers in the air, right? They're going to see where the energy and who's going to win this battle of ideas before they say anything, right? And it is very soon still. I mean, we're not even a month out of the Capitol insurrection, right? Like, things take time to process, and people take time to form their positions about where they think the future of the party should go. I think David's totally on the right path here. There's a great book that I read this year, Tim Alberta, who covers really the Republican Party for Politico. He has a book called American Carnage, and it is the rise of one of the themes is the rise of Trump. And there is a religious aspect just because there is a cultural aspect of it, right? It's right. There's the Whole Foods crowd, and there's the Publix crowd, right? And a certain part of the Republican Party has been misled, or not. They have been promised things that never came true, right? And it made them turn to somebody like a Donald Trump. How many times over the last decade did you hear that they are going to repeal Obamacare when they get into office? Right. And they never did it. and that wasn't Donald Trump telling them that at the beginning. That was the Paul Ryans telling them that. That was the Mitch McConnells telling them that. And they only gave them, 6 to 8 years of, hey, you got to do it, before they said, okay, Trump's going to come in and really do it by bulldozing everybody. And remember, Donald Trump was one John McCain, Lisa Murkowski, and Susan Collins away from doing it. Right.
True.
Closer than any other Republican has ever been.
Yeah, but there's been a lot of promises made in 2016 that never happened.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, we can look back at that. We look at how COVID and the pandemic had been handled by the federal government, and it wasn't good. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, people on the Republican side, don't they look at the whole picture? Or do you think you have people like, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene that, just throws out rhetoric again? A lot of it, I mean, really, to call it false, what happened at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School is just wrong.
Remember, she's not saying it's false. I mean, it's a very important thing. She thinks it was a conspiracy by the left to kill those kids.
Come on.
I know. No, I'm not saying.
No, I know, but it's so ridiculous.
It's the same thing happened with the Capitol insurrection. There were people early on that were saying this is Black Lives Matter, right? This is Antifa, secretly in there, and they would send pictures of certain people, be like, this guy's an Antifa guy. And but where I'm going with this is, I don't think that what do you do? I think part of the way to think about this is like, what do you do when people have ideas that are anathema to you? There's two approaches, right? I always say, like in World War II, there was the Greatest Generation. What did they say? They said to Japan, they said to Germany, your belief system, what you believe as a people, is unacceptable. And we're going to drop bombs on you, which we did in Dresden and atomic bombs in Japan. We're going to drop bombs on you until you stop thinking that way, right? It was a battle for an idea. And we killed innocent children, it indiscriminately killed innocent people to make them change their mind. And I think it's a little scary now because, I've had people say to me, what should they do? They should round up every one of these people that were at the Capitol, charge them with murder, and throw away the key. And just show people, like, if you believe this, if you're willing to do this, that's it. You're done. Talk about cancel culture. And we as Americans aren't going to have the stomach for that. Like we don't have a state where we're going to do that. And all those people are walking around today and they're spreading those same ideas, and those ideas aren't going to go away. And I think that we're at a dangerous point because.
So you're saying those ideas are not going to go away. So this problem is just going to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Because there's someone being born right now that 20 years from now is going to be, believing that's
right.
the way.
And let's be careful again, I think it's very important to dig in. And Phil was saying earlier, like, read these books, understand what they believe. And I think at its core, it's white supremacy. I've always looked at this through the lens of white supremacy. There is a feeling that this country was founded as a Christian white nation. And I think that you can look at almost everything through that lens where these QAnon people see it as our country's being stolen from us. And I found it very interesting because you talk about like real world policies that affect this. I mean, it was almost uncanny that Biden, the second he got in, what was one of the first things he did?
Racial justice.
No.
Executive orders.
Legal path to citizenship.
Oh.
And it's just like those people were pulling their hair out. It's like, here's another 11 million illegal immigrants that are going to come in and vote Democrat. Like, we're getting further away from the prize. And so I say all this because how do you fight racism? I mean, how long has racism been around? Like, read your Bible, right? I mean, was it, you think it was reignited with Barack Obama's I think it was always there.
No, I'm not saying it wasn't there, but do you think that really ignited the flame?
I think it's more along the lines of that, like, hillbilly elegy type thought process where it's just like white males are not doing well right now. They're getting their ass kicked. Like, I think I've said before, like, when you look at those people that invaded the Capitol, those aren't people that are doing well in life. Like, can we all agree on that? Like, these are not successful people.
Well, the thing that
are enjoying
me, and I wonder if it does you with what happened at the Capitol. And I want to talk to you about you being there because I know you were up there for the inauguration, Phil. But what scares me is some of those people were guys that you call and they come to your house when you have a fire or police. There were people in that group that were government employees at one level or another. And that's what really scares me. If we have these people working within our government.
That's what Pelosi was saying.
I mean, and now you have a congressperson that's touting that same thing. And clearly there's a district in Georgia that has a huge amount of people that believe this rhetoric.
Well, I think you're seeing examples all across the country of those folks who were firefighters and police that were there at the Capitol.
Yeah.
They're suspended, right? They're like they're in the process of losing their jobs. And it will be interesting to see where that leads, right? Does that just encourage them more, or does it, force them to reevaluate?
Or for every one that you punish like that, are there 3 other people that see that and be like, this isn't my America? That, you don't fire people for what they believe, and you don't kick the president off Twitter. It's like you're feeding the fire at some certain.
Do you think as a person in the media, and I'm curious about this, and I don't mean to besmirch you or the TV say,
consider yourself besmirched.
No, that's not my intent, because I don't really see that at the level you're at local news and information.
Yeah.
But when I turn on CNN, I see how how far to the left is it, or Fox far to the right, and not necessarily the way what the news they're reporting, but how they sort of opine in a very indirect way on it.
Oh, totally.
But I wonder, is the media part of the real big problem here? That people keep looking at the media and point the finger at them, that they're feeding this to us and they're emboldening people either on the left or the right in their beliefs.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, and people lump in the media as literally every working journalist.
Exactly.
And we have different incentives, right? Like I work for local television, right? We are hyper focused on what happens here in South Florida.
Exactly.
Like we are quote unquote biased towards South Florida.
Right.
We will pick a South Florida story over a Alabama story, right? There are, especially when you get to the national outlets, they have a product and they have customers and they will be biased towards that customer. Fox News knows who their customers are and they know who their eyeballs they're watching. So does CNN, so does MSNBC. And they have a product that caters to that audience. Last week, I'm not a huge fan of those opinion shows, the Tucker Carlsons of the world, the Don Lemons of the world. I was switching back, just back and forth between CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. And I just felt like I was getting yelled at for 2 hours, Yes. It's not my thing.
Chastised.
Yeah, it's not my thing, but some people like that. But yes, I mean, I think that it's part of our for-profit capitalistic media system.
It's interesting. So I have two observations. One is I saw a comedian one time talking about having trouble going to sleep, and he said, I was kind of examining what I was doing, and he's like, I'd watch the 10:30 news. And he did this thing. It's like, look at all this terrible stuff that's happening in your town. And that's, that made me think about your local news thing. I think also there is think about that clip we just watched. That was NBC, right? NBC National.
Well, CBS.
Mm-hmm.
I don't who could watch that? Like, what was factually inaccurate about that? I don't think there was anything factually inaccurate. But I think that what you don't get is the overall context for what's happening, right? And I think that the problem we're having is, where's that overall context coming from? Right now, it's coming from the QAnon community, right? And the people that are interpreting Q and passing on the context for, they want to take away your guns. They want to take away your rights. And I bring that up because I think that there is no inherent bias in that report. I don't think. I mean, Phil, what did you think watching that? Was there bias?
I don't believe so. And just like all of the half-hour evening news programs, whether it's NBC with Lester Holt or CBS or ABC, I think they're some of the best straightforward journalism you can get.
I agree.
Just watch that half-hour show
That's
at 6:30 and you're going to get a pretty good picture of just the basics, what's going on in the world.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's where you really hear the facts and the overall context of the dialogue. George Gonzalez says, it was the pendulum effect. Once Obama was president, it swung to the opposite and more to what we have today, and the election swung it back. I mean, is it as simple as that, you think?
I don't know. It's interesting. George, shout out to you, man. I've heard that before. The political commentator, Al Crespo, says the same thing. Always look at the lens of politics as you're driving. Whoever's driving the bus, whoever the next president is, has to grab that wheel and yank it. Like, we don't have politics where we kind of make minor adjustments. And we saw that in the first day in office, right? So
yes.
I think there's definitely a pendulum effect. And I think that one of the things that
let me interrupt you. Does that hurt Biden? Does it make all the people, the Republicans and all the people that supported Trump and all the people, let's say to the right, more angry, more activated towards you mentioned the immigration.
They seem to be, but I will tell you this. To me, like the way that I would sum it was, again, I saw another tweet, and the tweet said, Democrats, we'd like to extend out our hand to you Republicans. Let's work together. Let's find bipartisan solutions. And then it was like Republicans. I can't say the word, but it was like F you. And then it was Democrats. Okay, like we're going to go ahead and, we think we have the votes. We're going to go ahead and move forward with this legislation and make this happen. And Republicans, why are you not working with us? You're preaching unity, but you're not working with us. And I think that so the idea of like the Republicans work, not work, I don't think that matters. I think the problem you're going to have is, again, it goes to kind of this rhythm. And I'd be very interested to hear your take on this, Phil. It seems like what the Republicans do is they run up huge deficits, and then they hand off the presidency to the Democrats, and then they act as impediments, right? They act as Obama. No one can say that Obama didn't deal with what do you call it, like a hostile Republican minority, and they block everything, and then they run on Obama's ineffective.
Right.
And I think the idea here is like, that's what's going to happen. I think you're going to see.
I mean, is that just the strategy, you think? Both sides.
Why not? Like, why not? I think
or are we at a place where they're never going to work together?
I think, but that's where I'm at. So I wanted to talk about, Bob said, the United States lives as an idea. And I think that, Phil, I'd like to ask you about that idea, because the way that I was brought up about my America is it was kind of like this talented riffraff from all over the world. And if you wanted to work hard and start all over again and build a life, welcome to America. Get your ass to work. And it seems like the Republican ideal, that's not the Republican ideal. Like, I think it's like, whoa. But what about these Mexicans? Whoa, what about these people? We don't want these people here.
Well, I was going to bring this up earlier. I do think that there is part of American society who are like that. But I feel like Republicans do have at least an example of what they've done in South Florida, right? The South Florida Republican Party, is very diverse, and it seems to be doing well politically, right? Whatever the keys, whoever is driving the bus here in South Florida, and the Republicans also made gains in the Rio Grande Valley.
Yeah, I was saying Texas.
Yeah. But are those people going to be listened to nationally? I don't know.
Come on, Phil, give us the answers, because that's the key. And I've always thought about
it's $1 million question.
South Florida being unique because of the Cubans. But what's happening in, as you call it, the Rio Grande Valley, I wouldn't even know that it's that specific. But like what's coming out of Texas, this idea kind of goes back to some of my Republican friends who are not as skeptical. They're not QAnoners. They're not huge Trumpers. They just have this idea of like, we've got to better sell our ideas of free government, limited government, free markets, small business. And they just like, those are enduring ideas. And it doesn't matter if you're black, white. And listen, let me tell you something. One of the biggest surprises that happened this last election down here was the biggest growth they had was black African-American males voting for Trump.
Here we got Denise.
Denise.
Hey, Denise.
Coffee for you?
Sure. Why not?
Sure. Why not? The lovely and compassionate Denise who keeps us going. Yeah, you can put that right there. Thank you. And for Mr. Prazen over here, thank you, Denise. She is the savior of this show, and certainly somebody we appreciate immensely as we keep going. So
thank you, Denise.
let's go ahead.
But I think that's the question within the Republican Party is free markets. That doesn't square with tariffs. President Trump's tariffs.
Well, exactly.
Open, the free trade across borders does not square with walls. Some of the old school or, the Chamber of Commerce Republicans are very supportive of immigration reform.
Yeah. So then what happens with the Republican Party going forward?
We'll find out.
It's funny you say, and I'll tell you that it's funny that you say it, because I started my career in Atlanta, and I was at a big firm, and we represented a ton of these big farms like in southern Georgia. And they were so pro-immigration, right? They were like, when I say immigration, I mean path to citizenship. Like, I need workers,
Mhm.
you know, in the poultry plants and the back then it was carpet factories. But it's interesting that you say that because I forgot about that. Those were very pro immigration
Yes.
people.
This wasn't that long ago that Marco Rubio
Not long
was
at
one
all.
of the sponsors of the Gang of Eight
Yes.
bill. That was in 2013, right? The immigration reform. I think he's against this version
what
currently.
has changed so much since 2013?
The voters of the Republican Party
are not doing well.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. The white guy's not doing well, right? Like that's the problem is you have, you know, the hillbilly elegy problem of the white male is not doing well and is going to increasingly not do well. The manufacturing jobs are gone. The construction jobs are getting taken by Hispanics. What is the future of, you know, it was interesting too, because I got to tell you something. I thought about Biden shutting down private prisons. I personally agree with it. I got to tell you, as a lawyer, I don't like the private prisons, but how many white males work at those private prisons? You know, how many? I have a friend who's a Bitcoin millionaire, young guy, younger even than Phil. And he always says, he's like, we're going to have to go to IBID. What's it called? The guaranteed income. What do they call it?
Yang's idea, right?
Yang's idea.
What is
Guaranteed.
Universal basic income?
Universal basic income. And he says, because he's like, he looked at me, he's like, before you die in your lifetime, all these trucks are going to go they're going to be automated. There's not going to be all these white men that drive these trucks, heavily armed, very conservative politics. They're going to be out of work. And he's like, you're just going to have people crawling the streets, angry, out of work, their masculinity challenged because they can't provide for their families. This whole one thing we haven't talked about, one of Andy's favorite subjects, the incels. Do you even know what that is?
No, I don't. What is my topic here?
Incels. So one of the things they talk about is a big part of this whole movement is incels. And incels is a term for involuntarily celibate. You know, these men are not able to like get married, have families. If you can't provide for a family in today's world, you can't have kids. And so you have a bunch of, and what does that make? You have a bunch of angry white males running around. And that's kind of the hillbilly elegy. And then you have these, like the problem of toxic masculinity and the expressions of masculinity when that is happening and what's happening in our world. So I bring all that up because I think that we really have to focus. And it's like the last thing this country wants to talk about right now is aid program for white males, right? That's not going to go over well. But I think that we have to really focus on. I think white males are like the only group that life expectancy is going down right now.
Really? Well, you know, in talking about young white males, and we have one of them right next to us.
I'm not accusing Phil of being
an incel, but as we do, we've heard it's been covered obviously extensively in the news. The roller coaster ride of the GameStop stock. It went from $2 a share in a matter of a day or two to nearly $500 a share, jumping 2,400%. And it comes to mind, it was based on now, and I'm not a big stock guy, so you guys can kind of, fill me in on this. But as I understand it, this group that through Reddit are saying, hey, this stock is being shorted. Let's buy the hell out of it at $2 a share.
Yep.
And it just drove the stock price falsely up and destroyed these hedge fund managers.
I don't know if it's falsely up. It went up.
It went up.
Yeah.
It went up. I mean, based on the value of the company, probably not accurate at $492.
But we got to get away from that narrative. See, that's the thing is like Tesla's the same way. I mean, I've seen comparisons to Tesla. Like there's no this idea of what things are valued. I think that they're throwing that in their face. But yeah, let's back up. I think that you really have to look at this, Andy, through the lens of political rebellion. Like this is
here's what
class warfare.
And it goes and this is where I wanted to go with this. Forget about the stock. Forget about what they're doing. Forget about the rise of it. Forget about all that. But it's about class rebellion, number one. Number two, it's about the mobilization of that rebellion. Look at how easily these predominantly young people, And I saw it amongst a chat of my family and the younger, my nephews, my kids, back and forth with this whole thing. And it's like, stick it to the hedge fund managers. This has nothing to do with money. This has to do with rebellion against Wall Street.
It's Occupy. It's Occupy Wall Street
Right.
version 2.
Right.
Version 2.
But here's what dawned on me, and I want your guys' opinion on this. Look at how easily they are able to mobilize because of the internet and because how easily you can get, a few million people together in a nanosecond.
Well, and I think this is actually related to the QAnon stuff, right? Like, because the internet, you can literally look up anything on the internet. And this is an example of that, right? Like, you can mobilize people to do things very quickly and easily. Sometimes that's conspiracy theories. Sometimes that's rebelling against Wall Street.
Artificially driving up a stock from $4 to $500.
It's the democracy. Hey, you wanted democracy of thought? Here it is. I think it's really interesting. I think it's raising really good questions because there is what's the difference between doing this or a bunch of rich guys getting around at somebody's house saying, all right, we're all going to put $1 million into this company. They're just doing this very publicly and online, and there's thousands of them, right? There's not 10 of hedge fund managers. There's 1,000 of them.
Right.
And now you're seeing like Robinhood, that app, I believe TD Ameritrade.
Yeah,
TD Ameritrade.
TD Ameritrade
like
shut us down.
Major.
They throttled it.
A major company that does this kind of stuff is saying you can't buy this.
You can't buy. You can only sell.
Is that fair? Is that American?
I don't know if that's legal. No, I mean, I agree. I don't know. I think these are questions.
Well, there's already a class action lawsuit, and it's going to be like, who told them to shut that down? Because what happened yesterday was you saw it on the chat, this mad rush. It's like, what do I do? Like, where can I go buy? And it was this rush, and I was just able to buy it on Cash App. I was just able to buy it on this. Like they were going through like, oh, TD Ameritrade just lifted the thing. And so, it's going to be interesting to see. I got a couple observations about it. Like, to me, it's very much, remember what's happening here is the short squeeze, as they call it. The idea is these people are betting that in the future, they'll be able to buy these shares at a lower price. Mm-hmm. And now, instead of buying it at $3, whatever they shorted it at, they have to buy the shares at $300.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so their little, whatever bet it was, let's say, their $10 million bet is now $1 billion. But what's going to happen is, what I saw someone ask this question on Wall Street Bets, the Reddit thing was like, well, what if they just don't pony up the money? And I swear to you, Phil, I had this moment. I was like, I didn't think about that. Like, they're just not going to pay. Like, they're just not going to, like, great. You go bank, this hedge fund goes bankrupt. Who cares?
But isn't the hedge funds just getting a little bit of their own medicine?
There is, but here's the problem. So I got to tell you something. Like, I'm participating in it for fun. I find it interesting, but I will tell you, you do want people to be able to short funds. To short companies. Like, yes. It's a healthy part of the market. But what's happening is it's like there's a certain extent of this is like doxing. It's like, it would be like the closest example I can think of would be like, let's say that I know that you want to acquire certain properties. So I'm eyeing you and I'm looking for stuff. And then I know, okay, Andy has to buy these 3 remaining hotels so he can condoize something or whatever. And then I get all my friends together and we bid up everything. Right. And that's kind of what's happening here is like, we're scanning the territory. It's like, oh, these guys have all these shorts on this stock. Let's buy Dillard's and artificially drive it up and bankrupt them. So there are people like, it's like, I guess, no one feels sorry for hedge fund people, but there is a very interesting aspect to the targeting and this mobilization. And then I think that like we've talked about is like, I've always told you like, buy a Bitcoin because a Bitcoin avoids all of this. Like one of the Bitcoin went up 20% yesterday.
Yeah.
Because this is the kind of crap that like they can't stop you from selling a Bitcoin, right? They can stop you from selling your stock. They can stop you from buying stock. We saw it yesterday.
We did see,
Wall Street controls artificially controls the market.
Yeah, well, here again, this is a whole, deal about money, right? And about sort of challenging Wall Street. But when it becomes, and it's being done because you can mobilize over the internet very easily. When it becomes something much different, is there a danger involved? And should the government somehow start looking at how they're going to control, in a way, what's going on the internet? Because let's be honest, you have all this.
Okay, Dad.
You have all this stuff going on the internet, and I have people come to me with comments about all sorts of things that they quote unquote read on the internet, whether that's through social media, a Twitter.
Q.
I mean, we had, for gosh sakes, we had the President of the United States up until a month or so ago claiming false things on Twitter over and over again, to the point where Twitter took the position like, we're not going to allow you to do that anymore. That's the President of the United States we're talking about, not a schmo like me. So when does it come to a point where the U.S., the federal government says, wait, we got to get a handle on this? Because I know, as someone, and you too, being in terrestrial TV, let's call it, or over the air TV, there's things we cannot do. When I was in the radio business, because we were governed by the FCC. There's no governing of really hardly anything on the internet. It's a wild, wild west.
It is going to be a defining question of our time. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out of it. There's a very public debate now of that Section 230 about, should Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, should they have liability for what people post on their site, similar to TV companies, radio companies. If somebody comes on TV and we air them saying cuss words, that's that's a no-no, right? Like,
we're misleading the public that you serve.
Or I'll take it even a step further. Is like, for example, let's say that Phil got on there. Let's say Phil is a big suicide advocate, and Phil goes on his station and he says, you should really. Things really suck. You should kill yourself. Like, that's probably the best solution. They wouldn't let you air that. I don't know if that's a legal issue, but they wouldn't let you air that.
That's above my head.
Twitter is full of Twitter is full of accounts, right, that are telling people you should just kill yourself. And then then you're dealing with a parent who says, like, oh, my son got involved in this community and he committed suicide.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do you, as a society, what do we really want people preaching suicide to our teens? Do we really want? But the problem is, it gets so slippery, and then you get to the thing is like, yeah, but what about the gay support groups? And the people like, I don't want someone talking. So to me, this marketplace of ideas is, I think, as a lawyer, I'm kind of like Phil. Like to me, let it rip. And then we kind of just got to clean up the messes, like this thing with the hedge fund stuff. It's like, I don't know. I don't know this. I think it's like, I think you use the genie's out of the bottle or the cat's out of the bag. Like, can't put it back in. Like, I think it's too late.
Well, and I think we do have we have processes in place. People just have to use them, right? Like, and not abuse them. Like, okay, so Robinhood said you can't buy this stock. People are going to sue Robinhood. Yeah. They might win in court, and they also
found other avenues to buy it. See, that's the problem in today's world.
Yeah.
You can just go through, like I know, like some people on family chats, they're saying, like, the parents are, what's the server that runs out of Russia now that all the Republicans are on the chat? They got off WhatsApp.
Oh, Parler?
No. There's
Telegram.
Telegram. Everyone's on Telegram now because it's like they wanted to get away from Facebook. So it's like the server's out of the United States. The U.S. government can't control their chats. And, it is this kind of idea of like, you are not going to be able to stop that, right? Like if Facebook or WhatsApp said, we're not going to allow this anymore, all the servers are going to be in Russia and they're going to be untouchable. Like, you can't control this anymore. So I think that we have to think, I guess, like, I hate to say it, but to me, it gets scary because it gets into like mind control stuff. But you get to this idea of it's education, man. It's talking to these kids. It's telling our kids, this is what this is the idea of America. this is, like Andy's kids are grown. You don't have kids yet. I got an 8-year-old, and I spent a lot of time talking to her about these ideas, right? And especially now, because she's seeing it on TV. Like, why are those people, killing police officers on the Capitol steps? I mean, she's not asking that, but she's seeing violence. Like, what does this mean? And she saw mom and dad upset watching it. And she hears, like, my wife talking to her Cuban American relatives who are very upset about Trump. The election was stolen. And we're having to have these discussions with our kids. And so it becomes a point of, but then again, we don't want to control what people tell their kids either. What do you think? You keep saying her name. What's the congresswoman's name?
Whatever. I don't even remember.
I like how he has
Green.
to look. I don't know. He looks at his phone every time to say it. What do you think she's telling her kids?
I think she believes what she's.
I do too.
What she's saying, and I think that's how she's teaching her kids. Yeah. And I think people in her congressional district
are
clearly believe what she says and are teaching their kids the same thing. And it scares me. It doesn't scare me as a 60-year-old man as much as it should scare you as a young guy who maybe will have a family at some point in time. You know what I mean?
I mean, I do think we got to have perspective here to go, we are just leaving a relatively stable time period and we're going into an unstable time period. All right, so the 80s, the 90s, early 2000s were relatively stable in American society. But the 50s, 60s, and 70s there were high-level assassinations. There were people getting attacked in broad daylight.
Here in Miami, buildings were being blown up, car bombs.
Yeah. I mean, the civil rights movement caused a lot of frictions, right?
Yes.
Like we've all seen the pictures of the fire hoses and the dogs. And I think, so after that, it got kind of calm, right? The 80s were pretty good for American society, right? For the normal person, the average person in American society, right? The economy was going well. There were not the high level political violence that we saw in the past. Maybe we're just entering another period of stability because we're working things out.
Or was that time just a time when the casserole was in the oven and it was just boiling and boiling and boiling?
What analogy?
Well, casserole. No, I mean, look at it. Look at it
casserole.
Look at it this way. You came out of a period of time, right, where a lot of white supremacists probably weren't happy with where we came out of that. What was at the end of that rabbit hole, let's call it, right? Where black people, where we had, more rights for African Americans, for black people in America, where we were trying not to suppress them voting, where we had all these government initiatives to, equal opportunity and all that sort of thing. And was that just a time where white people, especially white supremacists, people that felt that, like you said earlier, where this country was formed for white people? Right. Was that a time where they just
slaveholders got together and wrote a constitution?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So was that a time like you mentioned, in the 80s and the 90s where these people were just watching what was going on around them and just getting more and more agitated by it and telling their kids, who are now grown up, that, hey, that's wrong what our government's doing.
Like with affirmative action and stuff like that.
Affirmative action, equal EEO, employment. And
there might be some of that, but then you also have to look at there's a large segment of the population who believe that the white supremacists retook power in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, and what's happening now is the counterbalance of that. With these racial justice protests and with everything that goes along with that. I mean, and that's a valid argument.
And I would jump in on that too, because I think that, again, I could take you back to the hillbilly elegy type analogy of, like, I don't think that you as a white person care so much when you had your $80,000 factory job and you were doing well and you lived in your 3-bedroom house and everything was going fine for you. Like, you watch TV, it didn't really touch you. Now, those privileges are gone, right? Those jobs are gone. They're having to compete in the open market, and then all hell breaks loose.
But now, don't you remember guys in the 90s like like
David Duke.
like Bill Clinton or Al Gore that were talking about how we have to retrain America for the new jobs of the 21st century.
That's a whole nother discussion too, because like, that's the NAFTA problem, right? The giant sucking sound, like all the jobs went away. I mean, like, I think part of this is, I look at this, having been educated during that time period in school when those debates were going on, is like, okay, here's neoconservative Joe Biden, right? He is a globalist, to use a term that has now become very politicized, but he believes in the global economy, and he is going to open us back up, and jobs are, it's like, okay, who can build this the cheapest? Great, build it there. Don't worry about American jobs. And I think that we've seen the results of that. I don't think it has played out. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Phil, because I don't think we've seen how it's played out, but politically it's been a disaster for America because all the jobs have left. We don't manufacture anything anymore.
Well, I mean, we got to put this in context. We're still the powerhouse of the world economically. I think that they're just going to be different, right? They're going to be different jobs, at least according to what President Biden wants to do, right?
You're going to be day trading stonks.
I think we're transitioning into a less of a physical labor job. I mean, especially with automation. I mean, gosh, we haven't even talked about that. I don't think a lot of people are talking about that, but it makes financial sense to have robots do a lot of these jobs rather than humans. And that's a problem that is just going to accelerate everything that is already happening.
And then meanwhile, we have in America sort of as I view it, and maybe you guys don't agree with this, a crumbling infrastructure. Okay. We have infrastructure that is substandard in many parts of our country. Shouldn't the focus be on rebuilding our infrastructure and creating jobs that way in America?
I think all of this is, to the back burner of this political culture war that's happening, right? We can't solve any of these problems until, this political fight shakes itself out in some form. Either, people get along or they don't.
So I have to tell you something. Not to toot Xavier Suarez's horn on this, but when this first happened, I was on a phone call with him, and he said, what we need to do, Dave? He goes, I don't know how we're going to handle it with the pandemic, but we're shutting down businesses. We need to come up with a modern WPA program.
Yes, I agree.
He's like, just send out an army of people painting buildings, rebuilding sidewalks, picking up trash. And it was like nothing came of it, right? Because I don't know. I mean, some people would say that's just American society. They don't want to work.
I think that's President Biden has one of those ideas as his executive order. I think that some department is going to create a conservation corps, right? It was part of his climate change proposals where, he would hire people to work on conservation projects.
Yeah. Yes.
So it'd be interesting to see what we can do.
And look what Bob Powers' comment, which is true. Miami is number one in infrastructure issues. I mean, look at our own community. You look at the Bay. We talked about the front of the show.
Pick up trash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's simple things here that we could put people to work for.
We're doing, just so you guys know, tomorrow, Shenandoah, my neighborhood, Miami Shenandoah, toward downtown. We're doing trash pickup tomorrow. I'm going to be walking around picking up trash because our government doesn't do it, right? I mean, you guys have both been to my house, and my neighborhood has a ton of trash.
Really?
And we're going to start picking it up. So it's just like an idea. It's funny that you say that, because here we are just on a volunteer basis where the neighbors are coming together to pick up trash.
Well, and I think that's an interesting thing to bring up. A lot of this, nobody's going to be the hero in any of this. It's just going to be the people deciding, we just need to pick up the trash ourselves. For a lot of this political anger, I think the ending is just going to be, I'm just sick of being mad all the time. I'm sick of watching this program for 2 hours a day and getting yelled at, right? Until we hit that point, I don't know if it's going to change.
So you're saying maybe it creates this sort of wave of activism that we're not seeing now.
I think especially people my age are very socially attuned and love to do things like Dave is talking about, where, nobody's going to come and pick up the trash in our neighborhood, so we're just going to have to do it ourselves.
Or do they
led
just
by young people? You're right.
Or do they just want to get on the internet and complain on Twitter about it?
I think they can do both. I mean,
what he's saying is his generation is like it's. I mean, we're seeing it with the stonks. In all seriousness, they decided to do something.
Right.
Let's go take a whack at these guys. So that's interesting.
And we have, I have never in my entire adult life, I have never existed in an America that has not been, politically
turmoil,
paralyzed. Right.
Yeah.
That is sad.
So I want to stop you on that. It's the last thing. This is a whole other discussion. It'd be great to have with maybe somebody from Europe. When you travel to Germany, Italy, Spain, Canada, those are two countries that have been forced together. It's like a bad marriage, right? Those countries are a bad marriage. The Northern Italian can't stand the Southern Italian. They have nothing in common. The economies aren't integrated. They have completely different standards of life, right? Same in Germany, Spain, Basque Country versus Madrid. It's all the same. Maybe we're just becoming a mature country where we're just going to have certain parts of the country at each other's throat. That her district, compare her district to California, right? Those are two different countries.
Yeah, but I don't know. In Italy, they're different? Yes, I acknowledge that. But are they at each other's throat?
Yeah, I mean, like the Basque. I mean, there's always the separatist movement. I mean, the Quebecois in Canada want to leave. I mean, I do think so. I think that maybe this idea of an America was a naive concept that a young democracy had, and that we're just going to have two countries. The last time this happened, remember, guys, we had a civil war.
Well, but I don't think it's that drastic. I think our social fabric is tearing apart. Like I feel a large segment of the population in the 50s were very unified, but they had so many shared experiences. They all fought in the war. They all went through the Great Depression. They all watched the same 3 TV channels that were pretty, similar to each other, right? Like there was America wasn't the plethora of ideas and options that we have now. And because of the internet, we're still just working through how this is all going to shake out.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a great conversation. We're coming to the end of our program here, but it was great having you two guys on.
Phil is the opposite of the usual dumbed down.
Yes. And then Monday I'll have Grant Miller in. He's the anti-Grant Miller. Monday I'll have Grant Miller in here, and it'll be at a totally different level. And I don't mean up here; I mean sort of down there. But Phil Prazen, NBC6 investigative reporter, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me
here at Miami Community News and the Andy Korge Show. And will you with me every Friday? What's the deal here?
We're going to make it happen.
Okay.
I love it.
David Winker with me every Friday here on the Andy Korge Show. Thanks for joining us here at Miami Community News. Have a blessed and wonderful weekend. It'll be a nice, chilly weekend here in South Florida. Enjoy that. Bundle up, and we'll see you Monday right here at Miami Community News.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great weekend.